lots of people, especially being on Instagram. Instagram seems to be like the safe place for people to talk about things like that, and I've noticed that just more people than I ever would have thought suffer from anxiety, even if it's not like a clinical type of anxiety. I think just trying to learn the ropes as a mum, and all the things that especially mums have to deal with, not just knowing what to do with a baby, knowing what to do with kids, all the things like arranging school, maybe other familial issues. It seems like I just know so many people that...
I know. And I think also when you become a mum, a lot of the things that you do with kids can be quite monotonous. You have loads of thinking time. Yeah. And because you suddenly, for the first time, probably for the first time, you have a responsibility that you've not had before for someone else. You don't only have yourself to worry about, you worry about your child for the first time. Definitely. And there are so many things that can go wrong being a mum. Parent, family, money. That it's kind of like a breeding ground for anxiety. And one thing I've found helpful before is just thinking about the fact that it's not that you have anxiety or that you don't, it's a spectrum. And you know, in any given week or month you could have varying degrees of, and it's, I guess it's knowing what to do when you realise that kind of
it's
maybe
gone beyond the norm. Oh totally. Everyone's got anxiety. No one could possibly not have anxiety. I've had a mum said to me once, now that I'm a mum, I think about
very pretty, Isla.
Very pretty, but Mummy's hair looked better the way it did. I had a mum say to me that she started thinking about things that she had never thought of before, like crossing the road and going to the middle bit of the road and like a truck coming and being so scared about what might happen. And you would never think that way before. And just being a mum makes you think of all the little things that could happen and try to avoid them. And it's when it becomes something that you're thinking about all the time, then it becomes an issue.
I guess the thing about when you have become a mum is that there's so much going on in your body, you know, your hormones, just the lack of sleep, all of that just exacerbates what like may have been there already or what just starts developing. This kind of, like you say, you could have crossed the road millions of times before and then suddenly a thought appears, and because of the hormones and then the lack of sleep and just other stresses, suddenly it's like a breeding ground and it can just...
Lack of sleep is such a big issue for mums and parents generally, and I feel like you can conquer anything if you've had a good night's sleep, but I haven't had a good night's sleep in 5 years.
I read this amazing book by Matthew Walker on why we sleep. It's in one of the non-fiction bestseller list, and it is like incredible in terms of how much our body does when we're sleeping, and it's a form of torture, lack of sleep, isn't it? And I think as mums you think, oh well, that's just what it's like when I have a baby, I just have a lack of sleep, but actually it does have a real impact on kind of overall well-being, health.
It does,
It's
definitely.
horrid, isn't it? You just feel like, I just feel terrible when I
So my dad, right before I got pregnant with her, I found out that my dad was really sick. He had bowel cancer, and it was stage 4 right from the beginning, right when he found out. And I kept thinking he was going to get better because he said he would. Although with stage 4 bowel cancer, the chances aren't too great. So not only having a newborn, but knowing that my dad was really sick was really hard.
Does he live nearby?
He lives in New York. Lived in New York. And he ended up passing away last October. And a combination of his death plus my son had sepsis when he was 9 months old. We nearly lost him. Then he had it again at 2.
Oh my goodness.
It was a lot less severe. It was a lot less severe at 2 than it was when he was 9 months old, but he ended up in intensive care when he was 9 months old. And we thought we were going to lose him. It was horrible. So a combination of those two things, and then I was with my dad when he died. It was horrible. And he died on his 69th birthday, so he wasn't old. Never got to be an old man. All of those things together led to really post-traumatic stress disorder. And I started having panic attacks just recently, like literally in the last 6 months.
So what happened when you had them?
I didn't know it was a panic attack.
Didn't you?
I feel dizzy and like I couldn't breathe. And yeah, just get cold and sweaty. It happened in one of my son's school parent-teacher meetings. I suddenly couldn't breathe and I felt like really.
And had you felt alright before that?
Yeah, and I wasn't particularly anxious in that situation, but it must have just been all the people around, and I knew that it was coming up to the date of my dad's death. It was 1 year, and it must have just been feeling that way, and then looking around and seeing everyone else just being normal, and it just something happened. It set me off, and no one knew I was having a panic attack because I just sat there looking normal, but inside I was going, don't faint, because that's what it felt like was going to happen. So I finally went and saw the GP about it, and they said, yeah, you're having panic attacks. You probably have post-traumatic stress disorder from these really traumatic events that happened all within a 5-year period. So Hugo got to know him really, really well. Yeah, he really was well, and that's made it even harder for me. The fact that Hugo still talks about his dad all the time, or his grandpa all the time. And he gets upset.
Yeah, and it's not only your own grief, it's the grief of what your children won't have.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's hard.
Oh, it must be so. I've not actually had panic attacks before, but I know plenty of people who have. And it just sounds like the most awful thing, and you can so easily just think, oh, panic attack, it's not medically anything wrong, but it feels...
It doesn't help at the time, yeah. I feel like you're having a heart attack or something. It's just horrible, yeah.
It just sounds awful.
But at least, now that I know that's what I was having, it makes it a bit less scary if it does happen. Yes, you can... I don't know, do you feel like you can tell yourself that you're okay and you're not? Well, I don't know. When I was having them, I suspected that might be what it was, although I wasn't sure, because I was thinking, what else could it be, really? But I hadn't really put it all together at that point. But I was saying, it's probably just that. Just calm down, it's okay. And it didn't help. It didn't help.
And I think what you were saying about, you were at your son's parents' evening, the contrast between how you feel inside and the impression you're giving off outside, when there's such a difference between the two, it's so hard because no one really understands, and you're put on a brave face when you're not okay.
And then it adds to the anxiety.
And that's really hard.
Plus, when you try to hold it on like that, no one then understands. So when you're feeling like that, you're feeling like you're letting people down, because sometimes you don't want to do something because you're not feeling great, and people don't understand because they don't know what you're going through. So just recently I've just started telling people, just cut me a little slack for the moment, I'm not feeling too great. So.
And I think for all the kind of mental health awareness and people saying we like more awareness of it, I think sometimes it still needs to kind of filter down to actually realising that sometimes someone who looks normal might say, sorry, I can't meet you today because I'm just not feeling good, and that being fine. If you've got any questions or comments or want to share your own experience of anything we've talked about today, maybe it's anxiety, depression, diabetes, any of it, we'd love to hear from you. So please do leave a message or a comment, follow us if you'd like to, and hope to hear from you soon.